with you, I had a lot of tech questions I wanted to get saxophone questions about because
Oh,
you're just, I'm, how can I say, I'm curious of when you started improvising solos, how did you learn about harmony and chords? You developed a great facility. What was your method for, for, for learning jazz?
well, I think, when I really started, it was just about learning how to play melodies, even with the blues, how to play melodies, and not so much think of the chords and not look at the chords too much. Because every time I did, it looked so foreign to me. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and every time I did look at it, I wasn't swinging. So I just started just playing by ear, and so then I'd listen to those cats that I really loved, like Louis Armstrong and Hodges and Marshall Royal and and Stitt, and then it just kind of broke off from there. But when I was practicing scales and stuff, I wanted to swing like I would hear a Marshall Royal swing, or I wanted to swing it like Sonny Stitt would play some of those diatonic passages, and I wanted to do that. I wanted to have the time feel with also that technical practice. So, and it really like, I don't know, it was, uh, I think that I didn't have a lot of facility at the time, and I didn't want to get messed up with all that. It was just too much too soon. So I stuck pretty much to the melody, and then I started improvising off melodies, because I couldn't really read changes. I didn't know, I was pretty young, and so I just, I'd heard other people play the melodies, and I tried to play like them. And then uh, after a while longer, then I started to say, well, what is this guy doing here? What is this guy doing here? And so then I said, you know, what is this line here? And then my father would say, well, this is how he's working into the four chord. You know, this is these are called dominant chords. This is what like took us out of this, away from the Spanish Inquisition, basically, and kept us from doing this. And the sunshine came out with the dominant movement, and so like then music started to move forward, and it was like unbelievable. And it's the same, I mean, I was hearing dominant movement just playing the melodies, but uh, I think I started with melodies and then guide tones from the melodies,
Hmm.
and I would hear the guide tones in the backgrounds, that I would love the guide tones as much as the melodies themselves. And so, I'd hear like Bird with Strings, you hear those beautiful backgrounds and all that. It's just that became an addiction for me.
Hmm.
I was almost as much into the guide tones as I was into improv. So it just really kind of, and then by the time I started really looking at changes was when I moved to New York, because I was playing all by ear most of it. And
I'm sorry.
I
What year was that you moved to New York?
1977, June 7th. And then I said, when I started to hear all these great players like Pepper Adams and Dodgen and Thad and all these cast, Harold Danko, Rufus Reed, uh, I said, oh, I got to go back to school. And so I had to kind of really figure this out, figure a more of a depth. I had good ears and I could go with things, but that wasn't going to go to the next level. And so then, I started to listen to all these great players in New York. And I was so glad that I moved to New York, because that was, to me, the place where I needed to be. I was thinking either LA or New York. And this alto player, Dick Spencer, was a good alto player from LA. And he was in Minneapolis at the time I was living out there. And he says, yeah, you can always move to LA, but why don't you go to New York and find yourself first? And so, like, I'm so glad I did, because I really did. And I found out what I didn't know, and how I it just, that city kept me a student and will keep me a student for the rest of my life. I
And
hate.
how did you learn these things? Did you study with another cat? What was your process?
No, no, I just kind of like would talk to people at the bar and talk to them. Who are you listening to? And I said, where did you get this from? You modulated up a minor third here. Where did you get that idea? And he said, oh, you should check out this Kenny Dorham's record. You should maybe check out like what George Coleman's doing, and and then I would hear like Bob Nitzer writing, like, or Vincent Herring, or, a lot of these guys, it was just become second knowledge, all these kind of alternate changes. And I started to just kind of get into that. And I really got into kind of relearning harmony
Hmm.
and getting more in depth with, just how I can move the dominant movement into different approaches. And I found out that each style of jazz or each style of music had a different way to move dominant chords. And if I was going to play in this style or that style or this style, maybe it's going to be vertical dominant, or maybe it's going to be more horizontal. I got to figure out what style of music is going to be best for this. And so I basically kind of got it with respect to the music to me came first. And what I needed to do was play accordingly to the style or to the era or to whatever. And that's how I kind of like got into trying to be more versatile,
So how
in harmony.
how many
But
hours a day would you say you were practicing around that time? Maybe when you got to New York, or were you living in a loft in the village? Where were you hanging out?
I was living, it's funny, I moved to New York, and I had a place on 94th Street on the Upper West Side,
Oh yeah.
between West End and Riverside. And I was taking clarinet lessons with Eddie Daniels and flute lessons with Eddie Daniels.
Wow.
And boy, that was a kick in the ass, man. But it was really great. I was like such an amazing fan of the way Eddie could teach and the way he was so versatile in his instrument, doubling. It's just incredible. And so he taught me a lot about how to put the air differently into the horns, how to become a better doubler. And so I was doing about 3 or 4 hours a day on each instrument, clarinet,
Hmm.
another 3 hours on flute. And then I'd go and start playing the alto and, start working things out, progressions on the piano, and start to try to find, sounds that I liked. And what's Stella does this, and maybe, okay, this is what I'm not hearing, or this is what I'm hearing when Harold Danko plays it or whatever. So I started to just get more involved, and then I go out and session at night. So it was just kind of an all-day thing for a few years, where clarinet, flute, and then the alto in the afternoon, and then go session at night. Go to sessions at night.
Eddie Daniels is a one-of-a-kind musician. I was just talking with Marty Now yesterday about Eddie Daniels, and Marty is a big Phil Woods guy. He was in the Commodores, I think the Navy Commodores band for 20 years. And share any story about Eddie. I've never met Eddie. To me, he's extraordinary. Almost an obsessive kind of personality with the way he approaches practice and the discipline. It's
Yeah, I mean, I think, like Eddie came from a family of doctors and lawyers, and I think that he was the musician, and I think he took that kind of work ethic and practicality and just common sense. He just had an amazing way of piecing it together, and he was just inspired, totally inspired, and his inspiration like it gave me an incentive. Wow, if that's the level in New York, if I even get to half that level, or not even half, if I even get to 5% of that level, I'm going to be in the game. And so, guys like that became kind of my standard of like, okay, this guy is on this level.
Right.
That's where I got to think, more about. I can't just kind of get by anymore. I can't. So that's what took my incentive. And I was doing a lot of playing with a lot of different groups and trying to learn basically, I mean, and that's where a lot of the improv, the different, because of the different bands. I mean, I was playing in fusion bands. I was playing with bebop bands. I was, you know, in other big bands. I was doing salsa, a lot of salsa gigs. I was doing, you know, Brazilian gigs. And it was just, man, I was like a kid in a candy store.
So you came up with to me a unique alto sound, and I often feel, if I could be honest, that you and Larry Snyder made an amazing alto saxophone record too. Have you heard that Mohawk?
Oh man, Barry's amazing. What a great player.
But the how can I say this in the right way? There's always been a divide, and we've talked. I've spoken about this with Bob Minter and other players. There's always been this divide between the white and the black culture in America, and we see it now, and it's important to discuss. And it was prevalent in the music, and it's still prevalent in the music. For instance, the loft sessions where all the players followed John Coltrane was debated
Right.
by some people. Um, my question is, how did you find your sound? I always found your sound and your style similar to the growth of Donald Harrison, Kenny Garrett, many alto players who I call loosened up their armature a little bit, changing the sound of the alto to away from the core of Charlie Parker and into. I hope you're not offended by this term, but the only phrase I could come up with was watery liquid alto sound. I really wanted to ask you about how you found your sound like that.
I think it's a very individual thing, your sound is. And like I came out of, Cannonball and Stitt and Bird and Hodges, of course. And there was so many influences and so many reasons to say, wow, I don't want to go there. They've already made such a statement and such beautiful. I mean, I felt like I would be not just like stealing, but not having my own vision in the music that I always thought was supposed to bring individuality out. And so I I was intimidated by all these great alto players, and finally it came to one point. I had loved Cannonball so much that I was just thinking about quitting playing because it was just like this. I I could never reach that level of beauty and incredible uh, musicianship like he did. And so I said, well, that's that's not what it's about. You know, what it's about is to find. So I played a lot of tenor uh, all during my formative years, and so I like the tenor and I like the way Train sounded on tenor. I like, but I wanted to find more of that on the alto. So I was trying to think. Uh, I don't need to play all the scoops and the bends and the vibrato and the Phil Woods kind of thing. And I admire them and I admire everybody that does. But for me, I said I wanted to find something that more focused on what I was playing, not how I was playing it. Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Instead of thinking like in their tradition so much, I was just thinking how to find my sound. And I remember, Kenny Garrett and I talked about this, God, back in 1978, I think.
Hmm.
We were hanging out and I was playing with Thad and Mel in Detroit. And man, it was just great. We just hooked up immediately. He was such a beautiful person. He invited me to the session and we jammed together. And we had a lot of we talked a lot about sound. I remember we talked a lot about our directions because I think we were both, in a like mind. And so I like to go between double lip and sometimes, so it's a little snakier. I'm not, like I think I have good intonation. It's not perfect, but I just wasn't really into guiding my direction. Well, if I'm in tune, then I'm okay. I just wanted to say, nah, if it comes close, that's what I'm into. I'm not going to be, I'm not going to like be chained to being a perfect, solid, traditional alto player. And that's what I thought that I needed to be for many years. And then, because my father was like that, basically, you know, going up through all the different lead alto players and stuff like that. I learned how to play like 7 or 8 different styles before I got out of high school
Hmm.
because he wanted me to be able to make a living. And so I was all about tradition and all about that. And then I finally, when I got this opportunity with a few bands, and I wanted to try to find myself through it. Uh, and it might have been premature, and it might have been like, you know, you don't have any right because you don't have enough of this, or you don't have enough of this, or this, or this. And I said, well, I'm never going to get that. I'm never, in my best day, I'm only going to be a cheap version of those greatest alto players that have ever lived. And so I figured I'm going to try to find it through maybe sound. Maybe I can find a sound that I really, and there's times that I go back and I open up my passion for what I learned with Hodges or Stitt or Cannonball even, but I think writing my own music, finding myself through that gave me more of a, resolution to try to find a different approach to sound and to,
I like what you said there, and I'm going to go on to another. I'm going to continue with the same part of it. You sent me. You've always, man, you've always been so kind to me over the years. Honestly, bro. I mean, you and Mincer and Vincent Herring and the one thing I love about America is, and I'm going to be straight up about this because America culture is very unique. You and I have traveled around the world a lot. Um, American cats and musicians, man, they could be, like you said, it could be Count Basie when he was alive, and he'll sit there right at the bar and talk to you when you're 18, 19 years old,
and
and share with you what the music is about. So you sent me an email last year because I've been going through some changes lately, trying to practice and get focused back on some things I was doing before. When you sit in the big band for a long time and don't solo and stuff, changes your brain. so, so I had asked you about art, to say the least. I had asked you about articulation because it's something that's always frustrated me. And I too started tenor, and the Nathan Davis told me at Pitt, this business is really hard now, and you really like bebop, but you're going to need to work, Marshall. That's what it's the greatest thing he ever told me. So he handed me a soprano and said, take this home, practice this for months. Then it came back, take this tenor home and practice this for the next, you get the point. Then it was baritone. It was the
right,
greatest news he had. Basically, his line was, he said, you like bebop a lot, but a janitor can't come in here to the school and say, I don't clean tile floors. I only clean, linoleum. So
yeah,
he said,
right.
he called me young blood. Young blood, you need to learn a lot of different stuff to work. So I too played tenor. Now the question was, you told me about breathing from the diaphragm and enunciating with your breath. And for a year I've been focusing on that. It was an amazing bit of knowledge. Can you tell everyone about that?
Well, I'm thinking it's for me. It's more about it's not about articulation as much as jumping on the breathing. My tongue is basically it's a lazy tongue. It's not been very fast. It's not very articulate. So I'm tonguing in the back part of my tongue, back here, because I want it to sound legato, and I don't need. occasionally if I had to play lead and I had to play a certain style, I played that way before, but I like my tongue. I just like to see how easy I can make it sound instead of how hard it sounds. And so that was kind of like what I got from, I don't know, listen to Jerry Dodge, and he always made it sound so effortless, you know. And I learned a lot by that. And also uh, uh, thinking that when my mouth is just basically like this, like I, like I look like I'm a goofy guy, like. And so that's how I used to play tenor. That's how I used to play alto, and that's how I played soprano. Just like this. And then, but my mother always used to say, "Shut that mouth! You're going to catch some flies in there." You know. But it was always about huh, groaning from the diaphragm, more like hit, controlling my pitch more from the diaphragm, so my sound doesn't change at the end of the sound, or, you know, yeah, I don't know. I was just kind of experimenting, Marshall, and just trying to find different ways to make it sound easier instead, and not how fantastically I play the alto. It's more like I wanted them to focus on, oh, what's he doing through the changes? What's he focusing on? How's he pushing that phrase, and focusing on the harmony of what I'm doing, and less on the actual playing the alto. You know, and there was so many great players in New York. I mean, I like you, and it just kept going and going. And I just said, the only way I'm going to really stay, I think, true to jazz is to not take somebody and try to live through them. And I really learned that from like Thad Jones. I learned it from listening to the way Dodgen played, or to especially listen to the rhythm sections. And I just it was a constant source of. That's why that everybody says, "Well, why have you stayed with that band for so long?" I said, because I kept learning so much, that I wasn't doing or I could think more of, and it was just every night I went down there, I was getting my ass kicked by Steve Coleman or Kenny Garrett, or a Lovano or a Ralph Lalum or a Gary Small, just uh, keeps going, a Bob Mintzer. It's just like so many, Ted Nash. I mean, it's just like so many guys that could just really play.
Right.
And so I stopped being so opinionated and started to really say, everything is so beautiful. Every one of those cats has such beauty.
That's
And
right.
I said, that's what I want. I don't need to just narrow it down to one thing and just do that. I'm just going to remain open. And so like then I started to play in a lot of different style bands to just learn how to play in a samba band, how to play, like I played in this band for like 30 years called Flim and the BBs, and how to get different sounds, playing the clarinet, playing keyboards, just experimenting, you know?
That's based. I've done that too. I played a lot of, a lot of club dates in New York, and I played a lot of tenor and played soprano and baritone. And I agree with you that it also opens up your ears because tenor is a completely different voice. I
Yeah.
always approach tenor as a tenor. If you know what I'm trying. It's not
Yeah.
an alto, and I can always tell when an alto player plays tenor and he's playing the tenor like an alto, and you can't do that. Just like
Right.
you just can't. And I've heard you play a lot of tenor. So my next question is, I could be wrong. Feel like I hear a lot of Steve Grossman vibe in your tenor playing. Did you like Steve's playing a lot?
I liked Steve's harmony, when he was coming out of uh, um, when he was coming off Elvin and all that. I think it's the mannerisms that I might be closer to him, or a Bergonzi or something like that.
Hmm.
But I think my some of my I started to get into uh, different triads, superimposing different sounds over changes, and started working on upper structure chords and trying to find more of the tradition uh, in kind of I guess more of the tradition in abstract thoughts.
Could you give
So
me
the
an
more,
example about that? You say let's look at say a G7 chord. What kind of triads might you move around over a G7 chord?
more of that, more upper structure, just trying to fit triad over triad. And I would spend like, because then guys were writing like that. McNeely and Brookmeyer would be writing these things that I would, oh my God, what is this? How does this, what? And I would spend hours and hours just searching for techniques or uh, tradition and finding out how can I make everything kind of look more like a dominant tension
Hmm.
and get more game on the dominant instead of always thinking it's just one sound that doesn't move. So I look at everything I try to put, even if I see some really abstract thing, I want to put a dominant, some kind of a dominant tension in there so it moves. And because that's how I used to hear the tradition of this music is through, well, I wish I could play, uh, but if I went like, let's see, it's probably too dry, but. So just throwing kind of abstraction and kind of like, how to make it fit with the sounds. And it feels like sometimes, like working on uh, harmony or something, it's like playing Scrabble, trying to find the perfect word or system that might bring you 80 or 90 points. So I'm trying to figure out how I can uh, just go through finding more tensions, different releases, different ways to, you know, make that possible. And it's a challenge. I mean, I'm I'll be challenged with it until I drop. I'm just like, I still feel like, wow, I'm still learning so much and getting my ass kicked by it. And I'm just like, thrilled by, I can pick up one thing by, say, a guy like Grossman and then just try to develop it, put some water on it and try to make something out of it. And I think of, all these great styles, I mean, like, uh, and how unique they all are in tradition of this music, the differences between, Clifford Brown and Miles Davis and Fats Navarro and it just and Louis Armstrong, of course, and it just keeps growing. Freddie Hubbard, then it goes into like a Terrell Stafford. It just that's what I love to see is the growth and development and the individuality and the bravado and the bravery it takes to actually find that.
So,
So
so
there was
would
a lot of times I played a lot of solos that actually really sucked bad, you know. But I learned from that sucking, I guess, and tried to find new approaches.
the biggest thing I'm hearing from you is what I heard from most of the elders is that jazz is an oral music. And I've been to many classrooms where I see the teacher will write something on the chalkboard, a line, and I know a lot of young players who, rather than going with the oral, what you just described to me is all about oral listening. Um, it's changed the music to have people reading and learning what to play over chords. Branford Marsalis told me, he said, they're not playing jazz, they should rename it. What they've learned is improvisational music, that is, what to play over this chord during this time at this moment. How do you feel about that?